Right. Looks like we're recording, so I'll get started. My name's James Pepper, Chair of the Cannabis Control Board. Today is Wednesday, February 25th, 2026, and I call this meeting to order. Let's see. We got a lot on the agenda today, so I will be brief, but I did want to thank everyone that participated in that legislative roundtable on Senate Bill 278. All those folks probably are just looking at the tax revenue that's coming in and assuming that everyone's doing very well. But it's hard for them to really grasp, the legislators, the kind of complexity of regulatory compliance and all of the statutory requirements and 280E and disproportionate treatment on, banking and insurance. And, we at the CCB kind of are imperfect messengers on that. They really need to hear directly from the people most impacted. So really appreciate everyone who was able to take some time out of their day and, speak with that roundtable. It should be recorded for anyone that wasn't able to participate. I know that time is running short in the legislature before crossover, but any last comments? I'm sure the Senate Economic Development Committee would happily take written testimony. Other than that, though, just wanted to hold on one second. Other than that, just have to approve our minutes from our last meeting and special meeting. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All right, great. So why don't we move down to public comment? If you joined the meeting and would like to comment, please raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you in the order that you raise them, and then we'll move to folks that may have joined by phone. I think Dave Silverman is first.
Thank you, Pepper. Apologize for any background noise as I'm traveling. I see you seem to be as well. I wanted to just provide some comment on the discussion item coming up on transfers between affiliated controlled entities. And this comment kind of is colored by my 25 years experience as a corporate lawyer dealing with intricacies of this stuff. Starting with the premise that you, for good reason, do not allow licenses to be sold as assets, but require, a change in ownership of a license to come with a change in ownership of the entity that is licensed. I think it would be, it would really undermine that position to allow any sort of transfers of licenses, even within affiliated entities. When you can split that license off from the entity in which it originated, that effectively is an asset transfer without the liabilities associated with the license, with the initially licensed entity. And so if you let company A transfer the assets to, transfer that license to company B, you then allow company B to be sold later on in a change of control transaction without the liabilities the company A may have accrued associated with that license. There are ways to effectuate an orderly, transfer, an orderly situation within your group of affiliated companies without violating your license transfer rules. For example, if you feel like you need to move a license within your chain of subsidiaries, you can do that via a merger of your entity into another entity internally without having that license be transferred as an asset. And so I really want to encourage you to maintain the sort of bright line rule that you've had, which I think works very well, and which is the legally correct one, and not try to create some sort of exceptions under certain circumstances, which ultimately, is just going to lead to abuse and the shedding of liabilities in a way that we really don't want. So that is all I have to say, and I thank you for the time.
Thanks for the comment, Dave, and thanks for joining while you're out of town. Ebo? Ebo, are you there? All right, we'll come back to you, Ebo. I see your hand raised. I see your microphone off, but anyone else for a public comment? And if you join by a phone and would like to comment, you can hit *6 to unmute. Tim? You there, Tim?
Thank you. Appreciate the time and the work that you all put in. One thing I'd like to mention for public comment is I've been encouraged by my compliance agent and have heard from other licensees that they have been encouraged to do the same, to report delinquent payments or people that are well beyond 60 or even 90 days as the rules specify, but also have been informed back then from my compliance agent that the CCB doesn't really have a stance on that, or there's no real action intended to be taken upon those reports. So I guess I'm confused about, one, the purpose of reporting, or two, what recourse may be in the pipeline for folks that do not pay for transactions. Thanks.
Yeah. Tim, I think just because it sounds to me like you get into some interpersonal business relations, maybe it's best if you and I chat offline on that and just see what we can do.
I would be grateful for any time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great. I'm out of town this week, but I'll be in touch next week.
Whenever convenient, no problem.
Great. All right. Ebo, are you able to comment now?
I think so. Am I good now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I had a question about a recent product registration, and I'm looking for some clarification on the difference between the product registration or the lot manufacturer. So this is a manufactured product we do. I've been asked to do a product registration for every batch we make. This is different than any of the other manufactured products that we do. So just wondering, like, we do inter-batch testing every batch we make for every product we make with a full panel COA. So just, again, I'm a little unclear why this one particular product needs to be registered per batch, whilst every other, like, cartridge, gummy, manufactured product we make is for a year for several batches that go into one product.
Eva, I assume this is what you emailed us about. If so, I think it is on the agenda for us today to talk about.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Appreciate the attention to it.
Yep. Anyone else for a public comment? Again, if you join by phone, you can unmute by hitting *6. No? Okay. I'll close the public comment window and move down the agenda. We have a number of items that are going to require some board attention. All these are kind of live issues that kind of have the ability to, repeat themselves, probably require some board attention. Gabe, I'm hoping that you might be able to walk us through, kind of give us just the brief background and what you need from us, the board, to weigh in on for each of these, starting with the first one regarding hemp and cannabis products.
Thanks. This is a continuation of a kind of policy issue that has, been with the board since its inception in various forms that we've tried to take a look at in rulemaking. And that is, at what point are hemp and hemp-derived cannabinoids permitted in cannabis products? And there are sort of two issues within that one issue. The first one is that at the inception of the market, you had a number of former hemp growers who had, in the course of their work, collected quite a bit of Delta-9 distillate. And they brought that distillate into that distillate was sort of grandfathered into the regulated adult use market, subject to the same testing and whatnot. But the expectation at the time was that it was sort of a finite amount and that it would be wrapped up pretty quickly. So the challenge I think the PR folks are seeing now in terms of product safety and seed to sale tracking and whatnot is that distillate that was grandfathered in has persisted in the market much longer than was expected, and sets up some sort of legal problems and some questions about what should and shouldn't be registered. Another related issue, the second issue, has to do with hemp-derived additives that are not THC containing. You took a look at this issue during your most recent rulemaking when you adopted the rules that you did in July. The root of the issue is your rule 2.6 or 2.6.4, which essentially says that product has to be either grass to be added to, that is generally recognized as safe by the FDA, to be added to a consumable, or it has to be on an express list of permissible additives to be added to an inhalable. And CBD and the other cannabinoids are not generally recognized as safe by FDA, and FDA has said pretty pointedly that it's not going to do that pretty much ever. One reason is that it's not possible to do that legally under the FDCA once the active ingredient, once a compound has become an active ingredient in a regulated prescription drug, which is the case for both THC and CBD at this point. So that's another way of saying that we'll be waiting forever if we wait for the FDA to decide these things are grass. They won't. And so during rulemaking, you began with a rule 264 that said, everything has to be grass, except it had this additional subsection E that said, notwithstanding what we just said about everything having to be grass, hemp flower or hemp products may be added to a cannabis product if three conditions are met. The first was that they were tested prior to introduction into the cannabis product for pathogens, pesticides, the whole panel, and concentration by a Vermont laboratory. Obviously, we can't, we just have to take COAs from out of state on faith. So Vermont testing of the additive, then that the COAs are made available to the board at the point of product registration along with the primary COA, and then that the label of the product clearly identifies, the label of the cannabis product clearly reflects that the amount and source of hemp-derived content. So that was going to be, for most of the rulemaking process, the thinking was that avenue would deal with this problem of certain manufacturers needing hemp-derived cannabinoids but not being able to put them in if they were not generally recognized as safe. I know the board had its rules analyzed by consultants and, of course, subject to public comment. And in the process of the consultant review and public comment, you had a number of comments that just said, why would you ever do that? Why would you allow hemp in a cannabis product, period? It's going to muddy the waters. And I think based on that advice, closed that avenue that we were talking about with the three-part test. So that's where we are now. We adopted a rule 264 that for practical purposes says no hemp in cannabis products. In the real world, that remains a source of terpenes, et cetera, that I think it may be difficult to source from in-state. So we've had this problem for a while. So there are the two questions. Do you want to expressly, the first one is what to do about all that grandfathered distillate. The second one is what to do about the cannabinoids added to cannabis products, and whether you want to try by waiver to kind of revive something like that test, just wait for more rulemaking. Then the question is sort of what's the policy position in the meanwhile. So I hope I haven't confused too much of that, but
We'll start with the first issue.
yeah. So I guess the first issue would be what to do with the grandfathered distillate.
Yeah, that's the trickier one, of course. Maybe we should start with the second issue first, if that's all right with everyone.
Mhm.
Dave, can you remind me, did we get any, when we removed that from our draft rules, did we get any support or opposition to that maneuver, either when it was in the draft rules or when we removed it?
When the subsection E was in the draft rules, it was heavily criticized by your consultants and I think a couple of other people who were concerned about the integrity of the seed to sale system. It was removed very late in the process, so I don't know that interested people would have been able to criticize its removal, which was effectively a tightening of what could be put in a cannabis product.
What about at LCAR? Was there any public comment at LCAR? Do you recall?
No, there wasn't.
Okay.
What does this mean, Gabe, for products that are like one-to-ones or having some amount of CBD that's derived from hemp, right, rather than naturally occurring in the flower? What does that mean for being able to create a variety of products that are on the lower end of the THC scale?
And we should have Mike maybe come join us for that discussion, and other folks from PR might be helpful.
Did you want to jump in, or you want me to?
I can give it to you, I guess, but that is, you're putting your finger right on it. The one-to-one, one of those ones in the one-to-one, your rule nominally says better have come from cannabis. And if it didn't, do we have a system for what to do about it?
And if we allow, my other concern, and just kind of in general from policymaking, is the traceability, right? So if we allow people to add CBD in as an additive in some way, like if we amend or started working fine from this draft rule that we had, what does that mean for traceability back to the source or pretty close to the source? If we needed to quarantine something, if we needed to investigate something, what does that mean for consumer safety?
It would give us more insight into whether or not, the product was safe for consumers, in the sense that it'd be tested at a Vermont licensed and certified lab, and it would have all the same tests that we'd require of any cannabis product. As far as traceability, excuse me, there's still an issue there, as we're not tracking that ingredient from its source. But at least we can be confident that that product is tested and it's passing or failing all of our action levels.
Okay, thank you.
So I kind of view this issue as the more tricky of the two. So this is going to make for an interesting board meeting as the three of us kind of figure out different policy objectives and what we want to do here. Because I do think there's enough manufacturers out there that are currently using CBD, CBG, CBN in their products. And where does that leave the market, and whether or not we got comments back in the summer? I don't want to be presumptuous in thinking people saw what the agenda item was today and knew what we were going to be deliberating on. I think what I would suggest is we push a decision on issue 2 till the next board meeting or the board meeting thereafter, and really take some time to talk to the manufacturing community on whether or not it's economically feasible to source these cannabinoids from our current adult use market. I think we might have a better understanding of where efforts from a state level hemp perspective might be over the next month. Could there be a scenario moving forward, if nothing changes at the federal level, to provide an on-ramp to future potential hemp producers to produce this product in Vermont for the adult use market? I know that's not the adult use market. I don't want to catch anybody off guard today. I think it warrants understanding the economics of what's feasible, what folks are willing to do. Would you have stuff you brought into the state from out of state tested by a Vermont laboratory, as mentioned, we considered at one point? I don't want to muddy the waters too much between hemp and cannabis, but from a non-toxic intoxicating perspective, I think this is a potential market disruptor, and I want to make sure that folks have an opportunity to talk to all three of us on how it impacts their specific business.
Okay. Mike, is there a rational reason, not necessarily a logical reason, but a rational reason to treat CBD differently than the other lesser cannabinoids? As in the one-to-one products, like just saying that the CBD, which is, the dominant compound in hemp, treat that one slightly differently, so that you're not like adding increased economic cost or just cost to one-to-one products.
I wouldn't say so. I'd say we would treat all of those cannabinoids the same. They're all generally extracted, distilled, produced the same way from the same inputs. So there's really no drastic difference, except for the fact that CBD is likely the most common non-intoxicating cannabinoid in our products right now. But from like a manufacturing perspective, I don't see a rationale for considering treating CBD differently than like CBG, CBN, some of the other cannabinoids.
Okay. And if what I'm hearing from you, Kyle, is you like to table this to see about the economic impact to businesses that are currently sourcing these novel cannabinoids from out of state or from hemp. But currently our rule doesn't permit that because we don't have this 3-part test. So right now we're just we have a rule that we're not really enforcing. Is that right?
I think I don't mean to speak for you. I do think that's right. I think we could either provide a waiver to that section of the rule, either in a perpetuity basis or a limited basis, while the businesses and economics of scale figure out how to supply these non-intoxicating cannabinoids from the adult use market. But I want to hear more from businesses. Where are you sourcing them? Would you source them in state? Is there cultivators that would be willing to put a portion of their canopy to this? I have my doubts of whether or not it's economically feasible to do so, but I just want to make sure we have taken all thoughts into consideration before I know that rubs up against currently what our rules allow and disallow, but before we think about a limited or a full-time waiver, I think it might be prudent to hear from more folks.
But the testing, Kyle, the testing in state would still, if we asked people to start doing that relatively soon, at least we would have some traceability and confidence in the what's being added to products, and we could still talk to businesses before making a final decision, right?
I think that's true. I don't think it solves the core part of the problem as it relates to what's allowed and what's not allowed in our rules. Yeah. But I'm assuming labs have capacity to test these products. I don't know, Mike, if you have any thoughts. Have you talked to them about that?
Confidence. Yeah, they'd easily be able to test these products. They're mostly distillates that they test all the time. So
I think that makes sense from a public safety perspective, but I think I'm fine with that. If that's kind of like a supplemental thought to the broader conversation, should these cannabinoids from hemp and sourced from wherever be a part of the program now or never, or for a limited amount of time?
I mean, just from a, public health and consumer protection, if we have something that's added and it's tested, that makes me feel a little bit better if we're going to push the decision a little bit. I guess my other question is, there's a lot of levers being pulled with hemp right now, and I'm wondering how whatever decision we make is going to fit in with what's expected to happen in November at the federal level, what we know that the ag committee is working on right now, like I don't want to make a decision that we then have to undo because the statute or something on the federal level goes in an entirely different direction.
I think that's part of my logic too, not to think
Okay.
that all of that will be solved in the next month. But I still think it provides clarity, at least a little bit, for businesses who may expect this to come, talk to us about their impacts, and maybe re-stimulate some thoughts about how the Vermont hemp market may be able to satisfy some of this cannabis market need. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
Okay.
Pepper,
Okay.
any thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I don't want this sort of regulatory whiplash, which is inevitable, just given the fact that the federal definition of hemp changes every couple weeks, it seems like. But I don't mind punting on this until we have a greater understanding about what the economic impact to manufacturers would be into the final cost of products. But do we have? Are we?
I was just going to add. I know that compliance pulled some preliminary numbers for us, so there's at least some guardrails for us to think about what the economic impact is. But it's also like a sourcing impact, right? So it's just understanding where these are coming from, how you're getting them, what's the cost, what's going to be the cost to produce these in the cannabis market. I want to know more there.
Okay. Yeah.
And part
Well,
of
that's
the
fair.
economic question, sorry, Pepper, part of the economic question is whether or not all the components can be sourced entirely in Vermont, right? If I'm just looking at the recommendation for issue 2, it's that there's an assumption or a belief that all of the pieces can be sourced from within Vermont already. Is that right?
I think theoretically the answer is yes. Do the economies of scale agree with the theoretical? Yes. I don't know the answer to that. Is it worth it for an adult use cannabis grower to dedicate a portion of their canopy to grow non-intoxicating cannabinoids to satisfy the adult use market? I have my doubts on whether or not it is, but I'd like to hear from those on the ground.
And Gabe, your original point was these will never be generally recognized as safe at the FDA level. So they really, I mean, whether it's THC, CBD, CBG, they're all not suitable for interstate commerce from the FDA's perspective.
Yes, right now, although, yeah, that's true.
Right. Okay. Well, I do want to make sure that we're giving the businesses that would be impacted an opportunity to weigh in. And I know that, sometimes we throw in an extra public comment session, but I think giving some of these businesses a little bit more time is probably suitable. That doesn't create any present public health risks that aren't already present, right, Mike?
Yeah, exactly.
I think, though, we ought to commit, at least for our staff, so they know what to regulate and how, that we make a decision, like that we come to a conclusion of some kind in our next meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. Yeah. And Mike, so we're talking about, isolated, we're talking about isolates here, right? I mean, that are coming into the state, that people are purchasing from out of state. Or
distillates, yeah.
Or distillates, right? Yeah. Are we picking up all, like, in the final product testing? Are we picking up all of the kind of residual solvents or adulterants that might have come in through those distillates?
Well, right now we are asking that licensees provide us with the COAs that they've been given, generally, from whomever they're buying these distillates or isolates from. So we have test results, but it's impossible for us to verify that they're actually related to the ingredient they're using. That's one of the issues. And the other issue is every state's testing requirements are different. So different pesticides, different pathogens, and different action levels. And that's another challenge for us.
Yeah.
And if our labs, when they're doing their final product testing, see something unusual, but it's not something that we've asked them to test for, they're not necessarily going to report that to us, right?
They would. I mean, if they saw something out of spec that that they're unfamiliar with, they would let us know. We have a pretty good relationship with the labs, so
yeah,
I'd be confident.
All right. Well, it sounds like we're gonna give the industry an opportunity to kind of talk to us about economic impact on this issue. What about the hemp-derived Delta-9 in the adult use market?
Hold on, but should we maybe at least do a formal waiver because the rule is currently not being enforced at all, even if it's till the next board meeting? Because
Okay.
right now we've just
Sure.
Okay. Yep. Is there a motion to waive 2.6.4 with respect to hemp-derived cannabinoids other than THC, Delta-9 THC? Is that the motion, Gabe, for 1 month while we until our next board meeting?
Yeah, just as a point, just to clarify where you want to go with this, is the intent to instruct the PR team that they can waive it if the 3-part test is met, or just waive it?
The status quo would insinuate that we're just waiving it.
Yeah.
Okay. So waived for the month until we sort ourselves out, continuing with the policy of demanding the COA that came with the thing.
Yeah.
I think that's correct.
Okay. We could, I guess we could, just to put a bow on it, we could take a motion to waive the rule to allow hemp-derived additives, notwithstanding the rule, pending further decision of the board.
Friendly amendment in March. So moved.
And well, hold on before you move.
I'm sorry.
We're not talking about hemp-derived Delta-9, though. I mean, it seems to me like
No.
Yeah. Okay.
We're
Okay.
only talking about non-intoxicating cannabinoids
Right. Yeah.
that have been incorporated in adult use products.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion then?
I move
Okay,
that the board on,
yeah.
I got it. I move that the board authorize the continued registration of products containing hemp-derived non-THC cannabinoids and terpenes pending further action of the board.
Seconded.
Any further discussion on the issue? No.
Not till March.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now we have the hemp-derived Delta-9 question. So, I mean, this one to me maybe is easier. I mean, it just seems like there was supposed to be a finite amount of this hemp-derived Delta-9 coming in. And it seems like there's not, and it seems to be unlimited. And sometimes it's cannabis, sometimes it's hemp, depending on who the buyer is, which creates ultimate confusion and just inconsistent treatment and uneven playing field for the cannabis market. But I do kind of recognize that, to Julie's earlier point, there's a lot of movement happening at the federal level and in the state level that may level the playing field between hemp producers and cannabis producers, maybe not. And it's looking like there's some coalescing in the legislature around giving the board authority over hemp-derived Delta-9 products, and creating kind of a regulatory framework that can make sure it balances the interests of both the cannabis industry and the hemp industry. So it seems to me like there should be a bright line between these two sources of Delta-9, one that's fair to both. We don't have the authority right now or the kind of rule in place to start regulating where these products can be sold, how they can be produced, whether they can be co-located with whether, you know, cannabis producers can deal with hemp-derived Delta-9. It seems to me obvious that the, you know, cannabis market should be for cannabis and the hemp market should be for hemp, but and they shouldn't really overlap when it comes to intoxicating cannabinoids. But I just don't know when we're going to have a rule in place for dealing with Delta-9 hemp processors. So
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think we've been pretty empathetic to some of the market movers of hemp that have brought their products into the cannabis market, the adult use cannabis marketplace. But I think we need an off ramp with a timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. Is the appropriate timeline 6 months, or do we align it with what we expect to happen in November? I mean, it seems like this will really bring us in line what we think what we expect this federal government to do, or does it matter? I guess is my question.
I don't think it's relevant, to be honest, because THC distillate is cannabis under state and federal law right now, regardless of whether or not it was hemp derived. To me, you know, if you just kind of want to do the dry legal analysis, the rule that really matters is 2.2.15. That's the no inversion, no diversion rule. And the first sentence of that rule says no cannabis establishment may purchase or obtain cannabis or cannabis products from an entity that is not licensed under Board Rule 1. And so that is really important because that's how the grandfathering can work lawfully. You're not obtaining it from another entity if you are the entity and you came in with that distillate at the inception of the market, right? You're fine. But once you've done that, that stuff in your possession is cannabis forevermore, and needs to be spent in cannabis products that are manufactured in the adult use system. And so the problem that you have hit on, or that we didn't anticipate, was it hasn't spent down as fast as people thought. And so that gets you to where Kyle is in terms of, is there a runway where at some point we're going to say that the grandfather stuff can no longer be put into cannabis products because it's just been too long.
It's been years.
Yes. I mean, we've been talking about this for 4 or 5 years now. And I'm sure we will talk about it for more years, but we do need to make things clear for our staff and for the industry, I think.
Mike, is there a shelf life? Is there a shelf stability for Delta-9 distillate?
We've spoken to the labs about this, and I would say at this point, they're doing their own internal research to really make that determination. It does seem like there is a shelf life with respect to potency degradation of these products, and as far as other constituent parts in these distillates, I think the research is ongoing, but certainly the potency is going to vary the older the product is, and I think we can say that with confidence.
Okay.
So how many years, right?
Yeah,
we don't still know what's leaching.
Yeah, exactly. The storage, we don't know if things are leaching into the product. There's a lot of unknowns, and we don't feel confident that those products are still fit for the market.
All right. So then it sounds to me like we're all on the same page. We just need to determine what the runway would be. I mean, the reason why I think the reason why I brought up the legislature and rulemaking is because, like, if we put a 6-month runway, we're not going to have a rule in place in 6 months. I don't think for hemp. So that hemp derived Delta 9 distillate has no economic value anymore, right? Isn't that kind of the problem?
Essentially.
But I
Yeah,
think the
but
issue is distillate that's coming across state lines, right?
It's also distillate, more than that, it's distillate that was
Like
grandfathered
we have
in.
here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But after we have a rule in place, I mean, I think part of the reason for the what's the conversation at the legislature is creating a place for low THC hemp derived Delta 9 products or full spectrum CBD products. And so there would be some economic value once we have a rule in place as to kind of where those products can be sold and how they're going to be tested and age gated and registered and all the rest of it. So having a runway that coordinates with a rulemaking process maybe makes sense, or maybe setting a 6-month and reevaluating in 6 months. You get Julie, Kyle, do you have thoughts on either of those?
I feel like things change so much that it's hard to say. I mean, I think a 6-month, I mean, we've talked about this so much that I don't think a 6-month transition is going to come as a surprise to people. Just because we have kind of we've had more than one public conversation about the direction this is going. To your point, though, there won't be a rule. I'm trying to imagine what the rule might be. I mean, we could, if it's a public health issue, right? We might be able to adopt an emergency rule if that's appropriate. I don't know the answer to that question as well as Gabe and you all do, but it seems to me at the outset that a 6-month transition is reasonable.
I'm really indifferent. I just believe there needs to be a timeline.
Yeah.
If we want to tie it to rulemaking, I can appreciate that. If we just want to say 6 months, I can also appreciate that. I know that's not what you're asking for, Pepper, but
To your point, Pepper, like, so 6 months from now, if there is no rule in place, that distillate for the time being might not be economically viable. But once there is a rule in place that addresses these low dose hemp products, it could become economically viable for that market again.
But to your point, I think when we talk to gifts manufacturers and other folks, a clear date to work with, because they will need to change, right?
Yes.
The source of their inputs, and having a date might be helpful rather than a rulemaking timeline, which we don't know what that is.
clarity might be cleaner here.
Yeah.
If we can, yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe in the wrong way, Mike, but if we disallow these in 6 months, I don't know what compliance would feel about these products being stored at a cannabis retailer or site or manufacturing site or wherever. Would we take possession or forced destruction that would ruin all economic opportunity for these products if we did do a rulemaking that allowed them in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, we could consider, conceive of something like that, like having them transferred to a place that we know has the right security, so that we have eyes on them at all times. I think that's something that we'd be comfortable with.
Okay. Then I'm comfortable with a firm timeline.
And so, I mean, I know, Gabe, you said that knowing what happens in November, November 12th, when the effective date of the federal change is set to occur, doesn't really have a lot of bearing on what we do here, but in some ways, I feel like it might, though, because it will change whether those products can or can't go out of state. It'll change, the potential market for hemp derived Delta 9. Does I mean, I'm wondering if we should just give a definitive deadline that encompasses November 12th, so that people will have some understanding of what the ultimate destination for that, what the ultimate market for that product is.
Yes, I guess I understand your point to be sort of, to the extent that we have entities that may be sitting on this stuff that feel comfortable that the federal loophole, such as it is up until November, would allow them to move their distillate in interstate commerce, which isn't advice that we would give, but if they feel comfortable doing it, that they should be allowed to do that until November. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's
just as a way of burning it off, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we're operating under one assumption, but it may be different for them. I'm wondering if we should the runway should be to the end of the year. I mean, I think we're all thinking either 6 months. I think we're probably all oriented to 6 months, but maybe what is that adding, 10 months, would just allow us to get a firmer picture as to what our legislature is going to do with respect to our authority over hemp and hemp processors, the federal government clarity one way or the other, and just enough of a runway for people to just reconfigure their business models.
Are we only talking about the input, or are we also talking about the end product? Are we talking about both?
This is mainly aimed at the inputs.
Right.
So to me, it would make sense to say the product's got to be made out of that ingredient by a certain date. When the product ultimately sells is. Yeah.
So by 6 months, and then whatever change happens on the federal level, whether it's November or December, or they push it to next February, whatever it is, that product's made, right?
Yeah.
All right. Do you guys feel strongly between 6 months or through the end of the year?
6 months makes sense to me if we're just talking about the input. It's got to be produced within the next 6 months. Then the source material has to come from, within the state market if they're still producing that product. But that product needs to be produced within the next 6 months. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, 6 months is fine with me. Yeah, I mean, I'm only saying that,
Are we
like,
sure?
all right, so, well, I'm just saying, like, some of these products, they're going to be trying to make adult use compliant products, using this hemp derived distillate. Some of the distillate is going to be used to make, products for sale out of state. And I feel like they're not going to know how much should go in which direction until there's some clarity in November. But that's my only thinking, but 6 months seems okay as well. I mean, I don't feel terribly strongly about giving
From a compliance, just to go back to the compliance question for a second, Mike, what's happening on the compliance side while these are in somebody's establishment right now, while the inputs in, are we checking to make sure they're still there? Is it tracked in inventory? Like, I guess what I'm thinking in terms of 6 months versus 10 months is, what does this mean for making sure that it's how long will it take us to make sure that this is all remains compliant until this change happens? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, we have confidence, like we know where the products are right now.
Okay.
One of the challenges for us is, the whole seed to sale component and inventory tracking. We were never given the ability to really track these from their source. So they kind of originated in our system as already, produced distillates with no true cannabis input. So, I think the biggest challenge for us is really comparing those inputs to the rest of the inputs available to the market and addressing the confusion that results as allowing these products to continue to be used. So I think, limiting the confusion would certainly help not just the PR team, but also a lot of folks in the industry as well.
Okay. So then if that's, I mean, what I'm hearing is the shorter the timeline would be the best for clarity. Okay. So then are we all kind of settled on 6 months from the end of the month, like starting on March 1st, 6 months from then?
Yep.
That's September 1.
September or yeah, September 1. Yep. Okay.
Do we also need to direct what happens with any leftover product? We need to say it has to be discarded, right? If there's anything left.
Well, as Kyle mentioned, we could conceive of a plan to maybe keep track of the inventory. That's something that we could iron out those details afterwards as to what comes next through some sort of formal decision that we can send out.
Okay, I just want to be as clear from the outset as possible. Right.
To keep
for
the
folks.
consequence clear, though, I think if you pass a motion to this effect, you want to be really clear that's not going to be marketable after 6 months if it's not manufactured into a product. So that would be the deadline to convert the thing into a finished consumer product.
Okay.
All right. Julie, do you have a motion
I do.
by any chance?
I move that the board affirm that the 9-THC distillate brought into the regulated market by entities that became cannabis establishments must be manufactured into a product by September 1st or discarded.
Seconded.
Any other discussion on this? Nope. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. All right. That's one of 7 issues.
Table.
Steve,
The next
can you
one's
talk
light.
to us? Can you talk to us about, or can you reorient us to the Keef infused pre-roll conversation?
And Mike can support you if you need.
Okay. We were talking about what is the status of Keef as regards the distinction between cannabis, which is the plant, the flower, and cannabis products, which are defined by statute as anything to which concentrated cannabis has been added. So that was to sort of take you back to the original debate was sort of what can a cultivator do with Keef vis-a-vis the cultivator's pre-rolls, which we've all said are a product. They don't have to be manufactured by somebody else, or they're not product, pardon me. Their pre-rolls are just flower in a different container has been the thinking, and so they don't have to be manufactured by somebody else. The question I think you were confronting last time we talked about this was what happens when a cultivator wants to add Keef to the thing. Isn't that a manufacturing activity, or at what point does it become a manufacturing activity? And I think one of the sort of the dividing line that the staff had maybe suggested to you was that Keef that sifted off or fell off a plant that is added back to the plant isn't really concentrated, but extrinsic Keef that is added to flower makes that into a cannabis product of the type that only a manufacturer could put into the market.
Yeah.
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 How'd I do?
So,
Good.
All right.
So yeah, I've had Mike in the compliance team and I had a nice chat about this. I think you guys have talked to them as well in the interim from the first time we brought this up. This to me is if we're going to make a change to current practice, anything different than what was just described, I think it's got to be in rule so that there's really clear distinctions between, what cultivators can do from a mechanical extraction point of view versus what tier 2 manufacturers can do. And having a bright line right now, the one that Mike just described or Gabe just described to me is the most logical thing for now. And we just, we run the risk of just all sorts of complications around inventory tracking, product recalls, if we start blurring the line between what's a cannabis product and what is cannabis. So I've come to the conclusion that that you should be allowed to kind of reintroduce the kief that's naturally fallen off from the flower, reintroduce that, but certainly once you start concentrating across multiple strains, multiple batches, multiple lots, that starts to become a cannabis product and starts to blur the lines. And you should just have to get a manufacturing license if you're going to do that, or we need to just negotiate with the cultivators and the manufacturers if there's a legal definition that we can kind of come to, or we can actually track those products, that those kind of concentrates.
So I don't disagree at all. And I went back and sort of looked at our rules to see I think when we originally had this conversation a couple years ago, it was exactly what you were saying, Pepper. People were trimming or drying or whatever, and the kief was falling off the flower, and they wanted to add it back to cultivators wanted to add it back to their pre-rolls. As the market has matured, it seems like people are now gathering, kief from multiple different harvest lots, and wanting to use it, sometimes not use it, others to save it for different product lines. I understand all of that, but when I look back at our rules, that does sound like it crosses the line into manufacturing. Maybe in our rules, we could entertain something that's specific to tier 1 cultivators who are producing a smaller amount. But it does, one of our rules is specific to say that it's got to be in a form fit for registration and retail sale. And my assumption, I don't know, but my assumption is that that no one is selling sort of bulk amounts of kief.
No, yeah,
Right,
no bulk kief is allowed to be sold.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think the conversation might be better kicked to a future rulemaking whenever that might happen. I just think mechanical extraction can be viewed extremely broadly, and there's a slippery slope to, in my humble opinion, if you're even tapping a sifter, you could theoretically be forcing more kief through that sifter than it would otherwise fall in its natural state, even if you're trimming. So I think there's opportunities for this to be a very slippery process. I kind of like the careful balance that the compliance team has suggested with, if it's from the same plant, same process lot, it's allowable. But, I think we're ripe for potential issues if we go much further than that at this time.
And for my part, I think that solution is the most faithful to the language of Section 831.3 that defines what a cannabis product is. So I think it squares nicely with the law.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's current practice. So do we need a motion on this? So we can certainly do one if we have one, but
have we been allowing folks to do it with under one plant? Is that the status quo, or is that something?
Status quo. Yeah, status quo is to allow for the kief that has fallen off during the trimming process to be added back in. We wouldn't allow for sifting or any other type of mechanical extraction. And I guess the worry has been that that's the practice we allow, but it's hard for us to verify whether or not cultivators are really sticking to that. Or if they are using screens or other ways to further refine kief. That being said, there are ways the compliance team can also do our due diligence to be enforcing that. And so calling out a bright line might be the best option as far as rulemaking goes.
But for now, Gabe, do you recommend we have the board make a formal statement?
I really like that because it results in minutes that tell people what happened and a clear decision. So I think if in doubt, I love a motion.
All right. Julie, do you happen to have a motion for this?
I do. I move that the board endorse the current construction of cannabis product, which allows recovery of kief from the same plant or lot, but prohibits the addition of kief extrinsic to the flower to which it is added back.
Is there a
I will
second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Uh, a transparent and consistent label terms with respect to, you know, the term live and resin versus rosin.
Yes, when I said it, we had a light issue. I thought we were on this one and not the previous one. So this one genuinely is light. This is really just, PRC. There are certain terms in the cannabis world that have very well accepted definitions and others that float around all over the place. And you have a mandate as a regulator to make sure that the labels on products accurately reflect what is in the product, including the way the product was made. And so the three terms we're really talking about asking you to consider defining out loud, or at least endorsing the interpretation applied by the PR team, are live, rosin, and resin. So I just want to describe to you how the PR team construes those right now. They all believe that these terms do have coherent and very consistent marketplace meanings. Consequently, applying them to products that weren't manufactured in the way they seem to describe is misleading to the consumer. You know, if you tell somebody something is live and it was dry cured, that's, just a misrepresentation about how a product came to be. Similarly, if you tell somebody a concentrated product is rosin, but it was actually made with concentrate, or it was actually made with a solvent, then that person similarly has been misled as to how that product came to be and what the manufacturing process is. People have all kind of debates about whether one process is better than another. It's not our point here to resolve that. It's just to say the consumer ought to be making that choice, not the person labeling the product. So the way PR describes live, or the way PR construes live, is that live applies to a cannabis product in which all cannabis content was cured by flash freezing and freeze drying. And that's distinguished from a cannabis that has been dry cured or cured by other means. So that has certain, people infer certain things when they see the word live, and that's what we would insist be the actual manufacturing process. Otherwise, the PR team would say you've got to take live off your label before you register it. Similarly, rosin, it very consistently denotes a concentrate produced without the use of solvents. Usually that means through various processes of washing, sifting, heating, and pressing, but no solvents. So if the PR team were to see something labeled rosin, but to look back at the manufacturing process and say, wait a second, there's solvents in there, they would say, no, that's misleading, you got to call it resin. So that's about it. I think that's pretty uncontroversial. It does depend a little bit on your sense of how firm and commonly understood these terms are, but I think the view from our staff is they mean one thing, and people are not confused about what they're supposed to mean.
And it does appear that this is essentially how they're defined in, like, on industry websites and industry, periodicals are it's very similar.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. This one is not difficult, I don't think. Just truth in labeling, consumer confusion, avoiding consumer confusion. Does anyone feel any differently? There should be allowances here. If someone's company was like a DBA as live resin extractors or like Inc., but they were doing something totally different, would this be a problem there?
I think it really depends on consumer perception. If it's similar to, we have the no curative claims thing, and what if your incorporated name has med or something in it? I think it comes down to reasonable consumer perception.
Okay.
But is it fair to assume if we vote on these terms, what it can do is give PR the authority to incomplete a product registration if they believe that a product that is being claimed as, live rosin is actually dry cured or vice versa or something like that. Correct.
Yep. Yeah, that would be great for the team.
And I'm just thinking the products we have currently registered that probably would be outside of this new.
Yeah.
We'll need to have a plan for those. Right.
Yeah, we can always visit those upon renewal. Any new products after this conversation that were being looked at in the registration system, we can move forward with these definitions and make sure they all make sense. And it, to a certain extent, it also requires the PR team and agents to have knowledge of specific operations. So that'll have to play into it to a certain degree as well.
I wonder if the staff is keeping track of other terms that we should define in the future, not today, but the next time we talk about rules, so that there's some consistency. I tried to look, it doesn't look like any other state has really defined this, although I'm sure it's coming.
Yes, definitely. The staff is always looking for as much clarity as possible in terms of, definitions of cannabis products and terms and all that. One of our staff members recently mentioned the USP and how they could be a really helpful resource, something to look into for the future. Their whole mission is really to bring consistency to terms and processes and things.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely keep an eye if we find any more situations where we need clarity. I'm sure we'll bring it to the board.
Yeah.
Definitions.
Do we have a definition of full spectrum? I can't quite remember.
I think your rule might define it.
I can't quite remember. I know some
Yeah.
states have it. All right, well, that's not a topic for a different day. Do we have a motion for this?
I move that the board endorse the given definitions of live, rosin, and resin, as well as the policy of the PR team that labels will not be approved if these terms are misused.
And do
I
we
will
need to
second.
put those?
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I had one more question. Should we display those definitions anywhere for the benefit of the manufacturers?
We can
need
put
to?
that in our product registration guidance. I think that'd be helpful.
You could
Okay.
also instruct the minute taker to add them in as they were read out here. Put them right in the minutes.
Okay.
Or-
and-
Right, but we're gonna
Show
want them on our
FAQs.
website or something.
Yeah, we'll get
One
them,
way or another.
we'll get them into our FAQ section and probably for Mike's recommendation in the PR guidance.
And do we have, is this one of those situations where in order to avoid kind of feeling like we acted, quickly, too quickly, should we have a delayed implementation date for a little while to get a little bit of feedback on those definitions, or are they?
That's up to you guys, but I think these were a lie yesterday. That should have been stopped yesterday if they were misused.
I have a general feeling that most folks on the call agree with the definitions and understand when and how to use them. There may be some who hold out that something is something that it's not because they can mark it up. I don't know, but I think these, I don't anticipate these being controversial. I've been wrong there in the past, but I don't think we need a delay date. I think we can just implement them.
Yeah, we're not pulling product. It's just going to get reviewed the next time the product is registered. And I'm sure that Patrick can put it out in his email. He can put it on LinkedIn. I mean, we can communicate it out, right? So people have enough notice.
Okay. So we'll adopt these definitions today and instruct the PR team to start using them. But there will be a little bit of time to modify them if needed, before products are stopped,
We don't have somebody who's got like 100 items that are packaged that they would have to go relabel. We don't have anyone who's pending with this,
No.
right? Okay.
No.
I think this would really just be about what prospective registrations are granted.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I assumed all that. And I know that these definitions have been well established for decades now. So this isn't necessarily new ground. I just, sometimes wordsmithing gets a little challenging. But all right. So I think we have a seconded motion. I don't know if we were
We haven't voted.
we have
We
not
did.
voted.
Yeah.
Okay. So any further discussion
No.
on the motion? No.
Nope.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next one, product registration input substitution.
Yes, this issue comes down, I think, to a question of when a lot is a lot, requiring new testing. And I think it was what one of the commenters at the beginning of the meeting might have been alluding to. I think the PR team could use some guidance in terms of when to demand that a product be tested with the COA submitted to them so that they can see it. And I can let Mike kind of go into detail maybe about what this looks like on the ground.
Sure, yeah. So I think the question here is whether we should allow products that have like rotating inputs to be registered as like one generic registration. Specifically, this is concerning products that are essentially infused pre-rolls, where the flower input is changing frequently. And the question is whether or not there should be one registration for each individual product every time the flower input changes, or if one registration for that product type is acceptable. So as Gabe mentioned, there's a testing component. We use PR to ensure that the product has been tested. PR is, kind of a snapshot in time. So there are subsequent batches that are produced, and PR isn't looking at all of those test results every single time. We would verify those through inventory tracking, and we'd also verify those through inspections. But certainly, every time a new product is introduced, we want to make sure it's tested, and really the only way for us to verify is through product registration. So there's that component, and then the other component is also tracking. PR acts as a way to kind of narrow the scope of what we can see, so that we know what is where using a PR number. And as you get more broad, it's harder to find those products just through using the inventory tracking system. So those are the two main questions that the product registration team has.
So if we got a complaint that someone got sick after using or consuming one of these infused pre-rolls, and we wanted to do a stop sale on that product so we could investigate. What I think I'm hearing is this would break that process, because really it's hard to track what the individual components of each of these pre-rolls is, and they're rotating and they change. So we're putting a stop sale on potentially a broader universe of products.
Yeah,
And
it
it
would
just-
just be more challenging. Yeah, it would be more challenging for us to define where those products are. What we have in our PR system, the product might be registered, named as X, but at different stores, they might have, different variations. So pinpointing where those are becomes a challenge. They're also tracked through inventory tracking, but there are lots of inconsistencies with inventory tracking right now. Our software isn't where we're still working on it. So, our confidence really comes through product registration.
So I've been thinking a lot about this one. and trying to find a way that is both amenable to business who want to operate with one PR in mind, recognizing that batches based on consumer demand change from batch to batch, I would imagine. And so if a business is forced to anticipate how big of a batch is and needs to align that with PR, it does become a little bit burdensome from a bureaucratic perspective. I think one of the things that we could look to do to kind of alleviate some of Mike's concerns and also provide clarity for folks that are trying to do a hash infused pre-roll is not only, of course, I think and the way I understand this is, yes, like we want one generic PR and we want to be able to switch inputs as new batches arise. But I think a core component to Mike's point about PR is if we require a full panel test of each batch, and I believe the commenter said that was something that they were doing already, and we could attach or amend that final potency test to a PR submission, along with maybe how big the batch size is to alleviate some of the concerns that Mike had, and also maybe the new label for the next batch to make sure that, the potency is going to change batch to batch. And I think it is a consumer protection problem if you don't have batch testing for this product. I mean, it could be 32% one batch, 38% the next batch, and so on and so forth. But if that's appropriately labeled and they're doing that final potency or full panel testing on that batch, not just relying on the inputs that are being tested, I really don't see a problem with operating under one PR if, that business or any business is doing that final batch testing and then amending their PR to include the COAs and maybe even waiting until the PR team acknowledges that they are up to standard. And I think that might be a way that we can kind of work to couple, 12, 15, however many PRs under this one product with allowing one product, but recognizing that we've still got to do a job from a public health perspective. Would that alleviate any of your concerns, Mike?
I think it would help narrow the scope. One of the challenges with that is it just, it opens up some questions about other types of products, but I do think that solution, would give us some more clarity as to what we're looking for in the field. So, we'd have immediate eyes on test results and the different labels that would be out there. It doesn't quite alleviate the tracking problem, only in the sense that there are kind of two mechanisms for inventory tracking. There's our internal inventory tracking software. PR is linked to that, but there are two components that we can track batches through the system. We also track PR numbers through the system. So a PR number attached to a specific product is going to give us the best outlook. But if we have knowledge of what exists within a PR through an amendment, it will give us some more clarity. So we'll have some more eyes on it, that's for sure.
Can I just ask a question about the scope of are we only talking about pre-rolls? I know Kyle used that as an example, but is this an issue for like drinks and gummies and other things too? Or is it only an issue with flower-based? Sorry,
Mike, why don't you go first?
No, it's not really an issue. I mean, so for like drinks, any manufactured edibles, our process is pretty defined, take, for example, a 5 milligram beverage, whatever flavor, each individual flavor has to be registered annually. That individual flavor might have 5 batches associated with it. But, under the expectation that it's consistent throughout its life cycle. So that's what we're looking for, is really consistency.
And those products, are they homogenized enough? to have them be the same every time? And the issue is that the products we're talking about right now are not homogenized enough for them to be the same every time if you're using like the same SOP and all that stuff.
Yeah,
I would have more concerns there, Julie. I think I've tried to alleviate with a full panel test for each individual batch, which I don't know, Mike, if that's off the top of my head required of it.
it would be really potency is what we need. Hopefully, we'd have all the underlying test results. They would
Right.
need to do full panel every time. They need to submit, all of those tests every time. But the new batches, we just need the potency on it. But yeah, I forget your original question, Julie.
Are the products are things like drinks and gummies and other products that are probably, are they getting different inputs as they're being made throughout the year? And are they homogenized enough so that with SOPs and then the production process that is acceptable versus with whatever products we're talking about now where they're trying to change inputs throughout the year?
Yeah, that's right. So like a drink might have different inputs throughout the year, but like you mentioned, they're homogenized, they follow an SOP. The expectation is that they're consistent. We require consistency batch testing. That process is under review at the moment, but we've been requiring subsequent batch testing just to make sure things are consistent.
Okay. Yes, I'm trying to understand why it's, thank you, because I'm just trying to understand why it's different for some products and not for others.
Yeah. So I think the question here is about the flower input, because flower is variable, it's changing, it's harder to have a homogeneous product.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
So, I mean, you have one product registration, you have two different pre-rolls that have different inputs in them. If we find that there's a problem with one and we do a stop sale on that product registration, it will capture both products. I mean, are we going to
Effectively,
get?
yeah. Yeah, like if you wanted to go that route, you could put a stop sale, say on the entire P number, and
Right.
every one of those P numbers would have to be pulled. I'd say, like on the back end, trying to trace down where the issue is still a challenge, but at least you can eliminate the problem at the head by doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have to be just overly broad in our enforcement if we were to allow this, because we're having less visibility, real-time visibility over the inputs to each individual product.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I can see where that could be an issue, because if we were to get a complaint and just to quarantine something for a short period of time, that producer would have to quarantine perhaps a lot more product than is really necessary, right? Or stop sale or whatever it is. They would not, the sales would not be available to them for more product than I think.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
But I think some of the ways that you could amend your PR to include the specific batch that you're referring to would make it so that, that might be the first step, but we might over time be able to narrow those parameters fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think through the amendment process, we do have more visibility on the product. So labels are also very important if we're able to see what labels are being put out there. You can do a search through point of sale systems. Most folks are, they're getting more specific in their point of sale versus what they're putting in product registration. So that's a way to, identify and isolate a problem. So that could help us for sure. I don't know if it necessarily is going to give us all of the information, but it could help the cause too.
Does the amendment show up on the label? So if somebody changes the input, right, they still get the same PR. Does the amendment show up on the label somewhere? I'm still trying to go back to how do you trace it back to, if there's an issue for consumer, how do you trace it back to the source?
The amendment wouldn't be on the label. The amendment is really internal for us to,
Okay.
to see like this product has changed. It has these components now. And honestly, one thing I'd have to verify with our product registration team, and I actually might even ask Alex now if he's available, if multiple amendments can be attached to a single registration, because I'm not totally sure. Alex, is that possible?
Yeah, it's possible. But like you said, amendments are administrative documents, and they don't follow that product through the inventory tracking system. You can't transfer a specific an amendment number. You have to transfer that original product. But you could amend something multiple times.
And the potency, though, it still has to match with whatever's in the product has to match the label, right? So the potency would have to
Yes.
still be the same. Okay.
And I believe that part is solved. I believe the products are being tested per batch per potency, and the new potency is reflected on the label.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead.
well, I mean, this is a somewhat complicated issue, of course. I'm generally of the opinion that we need to be making things easier. I mean, I think, for businesses, this in a way allows for more variety in the kind of small cultivators and eliminates probably helps eliminate cannabis waste in the system. But I also think that there are some consumer safety risks here. I personally, I mean, I can probably come to a conclusion on this today, but I wouldn't mind talking to, I guess this is the question that was raised during our public comment. I wouldn't mind talking to that manufacturer and seeing, is the benefit that you might be getting from this actually worth some of the risk to us having to do a much broader stop sale if we got complaints or if we got issues, and then maybe have a conversation just with Alex about how we can kind of trace back products so we can actually find out where the problem came from when we have these blended products. Is that all right? I mean, are we running into, is this one time limited? Can we wait till next meeting to definitively decide this?
I'm sure we could. I would say that it would be up, regardless of whether or not we allowed it today. I don't think we're forcing a manufacturer to do anything. They could subject themselves to that increased risk of quarantining more products under one PR, or they could decide to do multiple PR numbers and not want to assume that risk. I kind of tend to think that there's some safeguards that we've got in place to handle one PR number here. But if you want more time, I understand wanting that time.
Well, I mean, it's just like what we have now, one product, one PR, inputs change, new PR. That to me, it seems like it's the easiest possible system for our very kind of limited staff resources. And, to me, that's just like, that to me makes sense. But I wouldn't mind hearing from the manufacturer who wants to do this, what the
Sure,
benefit,
I get that 100%. I would just say that if I'm a beverage manufacturer or even a cultivator for that matter, you register one strain and do multiple runs under that one registration. Like, this isn't unfounded in other aspects of our product registration program. And so trying to bring parity there is something that I've been trying to thread this needle with as I considered my conversations.
I would like
Yeah.
some time to investigate some more. Like I think I understand both sides of the issue, but I think I need time to investigate a little bit more. wrap my head around it a little bit more.
Yeah. Kyle, do other states allow this? How does Metric handle this situation? Do you know?
Not a lot of other states have product registration, so I think that's a really hard question to answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with
I
that.
think Nevada has product registration, but I haven't talked to them about their product registration in general in a long time, and certainly not on specific kind of issues, you know.
But they do have the ability to do stop sales through point of sale systems. So I'm curious, just if other states allow this kind of thing. So
I would say in a system like Metric, it would actually alleviate a lot of these problems. And, product registration with a system like that almost becomes less relevant because we have so much more traceability. So, if we were using a system like Metric, then it wouldn't really be a concern. We'd easily be able to identify all the components,
right.
Initiate a recall if we needed.
I do think asking anybody who wants to go on this endeavor to do that. I can't remember, Mike, if you just said potency, if we were talking about this product or how other products are treated, but whether it's, the inputs are all tested. When I blend the hash and the flour to make a new batch, requiring them to do full panel or at least potency testing, I think alleviates some of the concern. Does it solve every problem for our imperfect product registration system? No. But, I do think that there's traceability elements that can help us identify, if there were a concern, which batch was really the core problem, which inputs were really the core problem. And, requiring those amendments and also all of the inputs that are used per batch on a QR coded landing page, give consumers some idea, and also the staff a little bit of security that if we allow this, the manufacturer might run the risk of having their entire product line quarantined while we identify which batch was the culprit. But again, I don't think we'd be forcing anybody to do anything. It's an option for folks that are doing these products to do that, and they could assume that risk if that's something that they were, they found it worth the risk to do so.
Right. It sounds like there's one manufacturer in particular. This may open the floodgates to others, but I would like to just speak with that person and just see. See what they feel like on that. So I apologize. I was traveling a lot this week, so I haven't had a chance to do all of the homework that I should have done before this meeting. But I do think that if this isn't an urgent issue, that we should table it until the next meeting.
That's fine. I will say I'm sure that there's other manufacturers that are doing these products where I've kind of tried to find the gold standard of kind of threading this needle is not just relying on inputs to be tested, but it's that extra test that needs to happen per batch. And I don't know if everybody's doing that.
Yeah.
Or even this individual. I think that they said that they were, but PR could tell us if that's true.
All right. Julie, are you okay with tabling till next meeting to make a
Yes.
final decision on this?
Yep. And do we want to move in that? Do we want to solidify that in some way so that our staff knows and the community knows what our process is?
Takes good minutes.
Yep. Great. Well, do you have a motion for that?
Mhm.
Yep.
I
Great.
move that we defer action on the question of input substitution under a single PR and revisit the issue at a future meeting.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Okay, packaging waiver request.
This,
Just go.
yes.
Great.
All right. So if you've been with us for years, we've been on quite the packaging journey together. Mike and I recently put another flour bag into the market. to compete with the Elevate bag. Part of the challenge of really trying to find a competitor to the Elevate bag is not a lot of cannabis packaging manufacturers are making non-child resistant packaging, because we're one of 2 states that allows any product, whether it's flower or otherwise, to be in non-child resistant packaging. Elevate originates from the coffee and tea space. I think it's always good to have a competitor product to any one product, and we've been hearing that for some time from the community. Finding the right alternative has proved task worthy, and there should be information about this new bag on the website. We've also allowed this company to put a PCR bag into the marketplace to complement the other PCR bags that we currently allow for cannabis products. I think at this time, though, it's prudent to pause all new packaging waiver requests. The more waivers to a rule we get, the less teeth the waiver or the rule has from an administrative perspective. And also, I believe we're close to securing a company to come in and take a look at some of the environmental stuff we've done and provide us feedback in what directions we should go. And I don't want to entertain any more waivers until we're on the other end of that endeavor. There are a couple current waivers within the system that we need to provide answers on. And we can do that with the ones that have already been submitted. But I would submit to the 2 of you that we pause all new packaging waivers till at least 2027 effective if we vote on it now. I think staff has also asked for us to indefinitely put current packaging options into the marketplace, like in perpetuity. I have a couple concerns there. Only because if you give those folks, one of the things that we do is we routinely check with these companies to determine how they're sourcing their products. If their packages are indeed what they say they are, I ask for specific documents to prove and verify that either a third party has looked at something to deem it compostable or biodegradable, or verify its PCR percentage. I don't think there's any bad actors here, but if we're not checking on stuff like that, they could change their inputs, their resins that they're using to make these bags without us knowing, and then the bag isn't what it says or what it's being held out as. So I would like to keep all the packaging waivers that we currently have. I think they expire in the fall of 2027. I don't think that messes up the timeline for some of the work that we're hoping to do with the vendor to look at some of these decisions that we've made, where we can go moving forward with this and other environmental endeavors that we've done. But I think pausing right now is prudent. There's enough bags to supply the market and other plastic options to supply the market. So I would support staff's memo that we pause here and until we have a little bit more clarity on a couple things as it relates to doing some environmental auditing and some future casting with respect to packaging and that.
I just want to make sure I understand what pausing means. So that means that whatever waivers are out there are there until 2027. And any other packaging that someone uses has to meet the sort of no plastic. I've forgotten what rule number it is. Gabe will know. But that particular rule.
It's just pausing new waiver submittals, not pausing the ability to use current waivers.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, and so they can use the current waivers, but if they don't use something that's currently waived, they have to have packaging that meets the 2.29, right? Or whatever, the no plastic rule. Yeah, okay. And do you feel like the sources of those packaging, like that there won't be, like, nobody's going to go out of business or stop producing the packaging, like it's not going to, there's not going to be a break in the supply?
No.
Okay. That would be my only concern, is that like tomorrow, one of those, somebody stops producing a package and then all of a sudden we have a problem, right?
I think we heard a lot about that at the onset of the tariff discussion. Obviously, that's an ongoing discussion as of last week.
Mhm.
But I haven't heard from any business. The more I talk to packaging companies, I don't get that that's a real concern of theirs. It's going to be reflected more in the price point. You know, it's something that we can keep an ear to the floor on moving forward, but I don't anticipate it, you know, destroying a packaging option that some folks might otherwise have.
Okay. And I don't know if this is really apropos to this conversation, but I'm curious, has anyone else adopted this? Has any other state like adopted a rule like this? Do you know?
There's a number of states that have mused on it, you know, for cannabis specifically and, you know, broader consumer goods. But no, we're still at the front of the pack, ahead of the curve there.
Okay. I was just curious.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I
Dean.
guess yeah, so I guess that leaves, you know, how do you want to put a bow on things for today? I do just want to point out that you know, in general, these waiver processes shouldn't go on indefinitely. The Administrative Procedure Act at Section 845A, you know, strongly disfavors them when they're repeated. I think an agency can give waivers under its rule, and you actually have a rule on waivers, 2.16. But if you repeat, the rationale behind the Administrative Procedure Act provision I'm talking about is that if you find yourself repeatedly having to waive a rule like 2.2.9b, that's a sign that there's something wrong with the rule and you're just avoiding going back to fix it in rulemaking. And so that, you know, that kind of augurs for let's hit the brakes on new waiver applications and, you know, think about either screwing up your rule with the real world or winding down the waivers that are out there. But for right now, I think nobody wants to cause any shock to the system. And so I think the decision before you right now for practical purposes is, do we hit the brakes on acceptance of new ones or do we keep the process as it was?
I'm comfortable pausing new ones.
I like your proposal, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I defer to Kyle on this, and I know that, you know, we were hopeful that you know, there'd be a little bit more innovation in this area. You know, there's a lot of companies that are very interested in reducing plastic waste and are trying to find non-plastic alternatives to packaging, but the innovation hasn't kind of kept pace with that desire. But I think we're in a decent enough equilibrium point. But given that the kind of the broader industry, the packaging industry, hasn't fully caught up with child-resistant packaging, not non-plastic child-resistant packaging, Kyle, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind over the next, you know, year, leading a stakeholder group, industry stakeholder group, to try and come up with whether the rule needs to change or whether there needs to be a like codified waiver matrix in rule or something along those lines, and see what the various options are. I know you're doing this at the national level through CANRA in Colorado, and you know, you're co-chair, and but is that something you would be willing to do, just so that we can in a year from now we can decide what should be in rule and what shouldn't?
Sure, that sounds fun.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it does. All right, so that's great. Thanks for taking the lead on this. As always, this is a very difficult, challenging piece of our rules. But
I would imagine we have to do a motion, Mr. Chair, if
Yeah.
we're gonna
Yep.
make this a real thing. Yeah.
Yep. We don't have to add the stakeholder engagement piece in there, but if there is a motion you have on this.
I move that we cease to entertain new applications for packaging waivers until 2027.
Seconded.
Any discussion?
No.
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. License transfers among commonly held corporations.
So
Dave,
this
you
is
wanna give
a,
us- yeah.
Sure. I just want to put this issue on your radar. I don't think you need to spend a lot of time on it right now, and we haven't given you a lot of preparatory material about it. What I'm going to say, or what I would otherwise say, was almost already said completely from beginning to end by Dave Silverman in his public comments. The licensing system we have does not allow for the assignment or transfer or sale of a license from one entity to another. So our consistent advice, as long as you've been a regulatory body, is that one may have a stock sale of a business, of course, but cannot sell the license as an asset. And the reason this is back on the radar is something that might want to ask you to think about, or more accurately, ask us to come to you with some proposed guidance on, is that as the application windows have been closed and time marches on, there is more and more interest in people, in places changing hands, for example. We very often have a corporation that will have multiple licenses attached to the same corporation. Those are permanently attached to that corporation under every understanding of the law and regulation that we've followed. But then we get new questions such as, what if the owners of that corporation incorporate another corporation, exactly the same ownership structure, all the same people? Can we break these licenses so that, one corporation's a cultivator, the other one's a retailer? For all the reasons that David described earlier, my hunch is the answer's got to be no. Otherwise, you would enable people to make kind of shell corporations and effectively sell the license as an asset while saying they're doing a stock sale. And the same business wouldn't continue in business. It would really be a new entity. And there you go. You would have issued a new license when you say your license window is closed. I don't think you need to decide everything about that right now. So I think that maybe the better thing to do would be to ask for your endorsement of a plan to come up with some guidance on that issue that describes clearly what the process applied by the licensing division should be. That's kind of easy to do because they have a policy that they've already been following in terms of how to communicate this to people. But the thinking is, now that there's more and more interest in exactly how can I move the pieces around while these windows are closed, it might be wise to publish that guidance, or to convert that into guidance, have you all look at it and make sure that you agree with it, and then publish it to really, finalize and lend some clarity there. And I want to emphasize that this is a clear view of the current law and not really a question of, can you, can't you? Right now, if somebody assigns or purports to assign a Cannabis Control Board license to a corporation other than the one to which it was assigned, that license is void. And so it's really important that people in the community know not to do that, because it can have drastic consequences. And we can talk about what the policies you want what policies you want to have in unusual circumstances, such as common ownership. What if somebody, and I think this came up recently, somebody said, well, I want to reincorporate as an S Corp. Is that going to be allowed? So we'll have to tackle those. This isn't the place to do it, I don't think. I think probably the best way to do it would be to come up with some guidance and then use that to structure the discussion, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, and I would love that. And if you think that there's needed legislation, now's a good time to get that information over to the relevant committees. So yes, the sooner the better on getting that done. But we can look at whatever you come up with at the next meeting. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. And to be clear, I don't think there's legislative need here. I think the legislature has been clear. If they wanted a highest bidder system, they would have designed one.
Right. I just think about those kind of unusual circumstances where we're maybe making. Well, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, but as you're saying, this is complicated. You'll get into the change of corporate form thing for reasons that have nothing to do with trying to transfer a license. We'll have to sort that out.
Yeah, okay. Any questions for Gabe about that?
No, thank you, Gabe.
Okay, great. Olga, can we turn things over to you?
Yes, we could do that. All right. All right. So our executive director report for the month of February. A quick look at the education and outreach initiatives. Our first TCB Insights webinar took place on February 4th and went over latest updates on advertising changes to the advertising guidance. And our next session will be on the license renewal requirements. It is currently scheduled for April 8th, and folks should stay tuned for a formal announcement from Patrick to give it a little bit more color. So that's a quick update here. And now onto the licensing data, and all of the numbers are good through February 18th. So first, you're looking at the chart with our active licenses. We're at 567, which is 4 fewer than last month. The attrition rate is clearly slowing down, and then we are seeing numbers stabilizing, following what we had experienced in the early 2025, which was a somewhat artificial spike in licensure. And yes, as we discussed in prior months, we are keeping track of the trends and expect them to level off in the coming months, continue to level off the numbers. Now, another slide on the active licenses. So here you're looking at the active licenses broken up by type. It's across the last 3 months. February numbers are in red. So just some minor changes months over months. So 7 cultivators exited the market, and we also gained 2 manufacturers, and a retail license has been reinstated by the board earlier this month. So those are all captured on this slide. And moving on, a quick look at the priority status slides, and no changes here months over months. Next, as always, we take a closer look at our cultivators. This slide breaks them down by type and tier across the last 3 months, so you could see a clear picture of gains and losses over time. Again, red or orange red is February data. So tier 1 indoor has seen the biggest changes in the last months. And then we also had a tier 2 outdoor downsizing to a mixed tier 1. Again, those are the highlights and the only changes months over months that we are reporting. I'll move on. A quick look at the canopy capacity slide. Not much changes here, not many changes here. If you look back at the last few months, the current total amount of licensed canopy is 842,500. But again, just incremental changes in the last few months. And now we'll look quickly, one more slide here on licensing, and that's our relinquishments. So for February, again, this slide has 3 months worth of data. So you can again compare and look for trends months over months. If you look at the last block on each of the slides, you'll find February data. So we are reporting 8 total relinquishments, representing 7 tier 1 indoor cultivators and 1 wholesaler. And those include 3 standard, 4 economic empowerment, and 1 social equity licensee. So that's what we got for you on licensing data. This next section is new. I wanted to take a few minutes to share the cessation of operations data for the entire calendar year of 2025. Our team has pulled together those numbers. And hopefully this will give you a clear snapshot of what we're seeing in terms of who is exiting the market, at what scale, and for what reasons. So I'll dive right in. So as you can tell from this slide, 96 licensees were relinquished in 2025. Of those, 73 were cultivators, our largest group, followed by 16 manufacturers, and then remaining relinquishments distributed among other license types, as you could see. And those are full relinquishments. So these numbers do not capture businesses that have tiered down. So again, just licensees who exited the regulated market entirely. Next, I have a little more color on this. So we are breaking down this data across cultivation tiers, manufacturing tiers, and of course, keeping track of other license types as well. So again, outdoor tier 1 is leading the way with the most relinquishments at 33, and then indoor tier 1 with 18. And we are looking at 11 manufacturers tier 2 also relinquishing their licenses in 2025. So that's a look on the tiers and types. And now here, even more context, and this slide could give you some understanding of whether the relinquishments were voluntary or involuntary. So specifically, you could see whether our licensees have been relinquishing as a result of enforcement actions or failures to meet renewal requirements. And you could see that out of 96 total relinquishments, only 4 were involuntary. So only 4 licensees fell into that bucket. And then the remaining 92 relinquishments were voluntary decisions made by the licensees themselves. So again, you could probably gather from this slide that the majority of the exits were market-driven rather than regulatory enforcement-driven.
Olga,
yes.
do we have a sense of the people who relinquished their licenses, particularly the cultivators, whether or not they were actively cultivating, or how much of their licensed canopy they were actually using? Do we have that data?
Well, not readily available. We could probably get some, but I think my understanding is a lot of those folks were not actively cultivating.
Okay.
But I would say we'll probably need to take a deeper look into that, and we could pull something together for the next meeting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. I have another slide here, and here you'll be looking at the reasons for relinquishment as they were reported to our agents by the relinquishing licensees. Many of the folks who relinquished mentioned more than one reason. So what you're looking at here is, you could tell maybe from the slide, top right corner, that 74% of businesses gave their responses to us. So we're basing, this chart is based on 71 licensees who exited. And you could look at the breakdown, and most common reasons, as you could probably tell, are related to market access, profitability, and then personal reasons. But we tried to summarize all of the reasons that were given to us. And we'll definitely continue to collect this information to make sure you have access to that and can understand the broader economic and operational pressures that our businesses might be facing. So one more slide I have for you on this, and that's just a breakdown based on the priority status of the licensees exiting the market. The economic empowerment number is a little higher than what we usually see as far as a breakdown of our licensees. Social equity, I think we generally at 15, 16%. So again, slightly higher in terms of being represented in this slide, but not by much. So that's what I have for you here on the relinquishment data. And now we'll move into our compliance and enforcement part of the presentation for just the month of February. I'll go through this. Mike and team put a lot of work into this, but I'll go through this quickly and folks can obviously revisit those slides at their convenience. So 16 inspections, and currently we have 16 open investigations that team is involved in. And I think Julie you asked last month about the investigation numbers, and those are open investigations. Most of them are new, but those are all open. Yep. So yes, you could look at those numbers. This is a quick slide on our inspections. Again, 3 months worth of data. February data is in red. So you could see our folks visiting cultivators, retailers, and manufacturers primarily, plus 5 visits to the site with 5 medical use endorsements that are additionally identified here now. So that's the data here. Investigations. Those 16 are broken down here. Again, you're looking for numbers for the red color here for February data. And now I'll jump into the types of investigations underway in the last 30 days. And again, a reminder, each color represents a different license type that is involved in the investigation, with red reserved for investigations involving a retail license, orange is manufacturing, green cultivation. And this month we have a blue category that represents investigations of intoxicating hemp sales. So that's new this month. And you could see what topics, what issues are being investigated as
Olga,
well.
is there, Olga, or if Mike is still in the room, is there coordination with Department of Liquor and Lottery on those? I know that some of those products are sold at their licensees, or do we coordinate with them?
Yes, almost always. Yep.
Awesome.
We'll work with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Again, the usual slide that you've seen before many times, looking at the other types of actions that our compliance team performed over the last 3 months. You could see our complaint count for the month is 21. And then we issued 2 notices of violation, oversaw 5 product destructions, and documented 9 cessation of operations. So that's what we got. Quick look at the types of complaints we received. As usual, advertising tends to lead the way. Also, we got product complaints, and again, those intoxicated hemp sales that have led to some investigative work very quickly. Okay. Next is our notices of violations, 2 issued on pesticides, and that is a wrap for the compliance part of the presentation. And now we are onto the medical program, and I'll just have a quick slide here for you showing our latest numbers, and the trend continues. We are now at 3,118 patients, adding almost 50 new patients in the last month, and we also gained a caregiver. So that's the trend. And that's what I got for you today in terms of data. So we're now ready to move on to the step recommendations. And I have not too many slides for you today. So first is a slide on initial licenses. We just have one manufacturer, one applicant looking for a manufacturing tier 2 license. This applicant is already a licensee with us, and they hold a cultivation license and a retail license. And the licensing team recommends approval.
Great. Is there a motion for that?
I move that the board accept staff recommendations to approve the complete applications for initial licensure as presented.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. So next I have 2 slides representing our timely regular renewals. So I'll give you a second. This is the first one. And here is our second slide. And again, all of those are recommended for approval by our licensing team.
All right. Any questions for Olga about any of these?
Nope.
Nope.
Is there a motion to approve the staff recommendations?
I move that the board approve the staff recommendations for renewal for licensure as presented.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. So now here we have businesses seeking to renew their retail licenses and also add a medical endorsement. The licensing team recommends that the board approve issuance of the endorsed licenses. And again, as a reminder to everybody, Rule 3.4.3b requires enhanced training for patient-facing retail staff. And both establishments presented here have employees signed up for tomorrow's training course, which is great. And yeah, this our staff recommends approval.
All right. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board approve the 2 renewals listed, adding medical endorsements for each.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Moving on. So here we have one renewal application that also includes a request for ownership changes. The board received a licensing memo that would have provided supplemental information for this licensee. But just to confirm, a new owner has gone through the background process and successfully completed affiliations forms. And the licensing team recommends approval here.
Any questions?
Nope.
Nope. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board approve the renewal of the retail license of Mill 47 LLC and that we approve the amendment of the license to reflect new ownership.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. All right. So next we have 2 establishments seeking to amend their retail licenses mid-cycle in order to add a medical endorsement. Again, our licensing team recommends that the board approve issuance of the endorsed licenses. And just to confirm, both establishments have employees signed up for tomorrow's training course by Cannabis. So folks should have trained personnel.
Great. All right. Is there a motion to approve with the medical endorsement?
I move that the board approve issuance of medical endorsements to the 2 retail licenses listed.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Right. And one more slide here. So here you're looking at 5 late, but now complete renewal applications. The narratives for all All of them have been shared with the board ahead of this meeting, and the licensing division recommends that you approve this late and complete applications.
Great. Any questions about these?
No questions, but I noticed that there's no late and incomplete this month, and that's great. That's a good sign.
Yes, thank you for that, everybody.
All right. Is there a motion to accept and approve?
I move that the board accept the 5 late and complete renewal applications listed and that we approve the renewal of the licenses.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's what we got for you today on the ED report.
All right. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, the entire team. It was very helpful, very good work. We have 2 relocation requests that we have to deal with. These are retailers relocating. First one is Lake Effect. It looks like they're just moving kind of across the street. So can't imagine there's any issue with retail density on that one. Any questions for licensing or Olga on that?
No.
No.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the relocation request for Lake Effect?
I move that the board approve the relocation amendment requested.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. The next one, relocation request, Lovely Cannabis moving from Brandon to Springfield. We got the similar report. Thank you, Melissa, for gathering that information. Thank you to the licensee for providing it. Seems to me, just based on my review, that it certainly would improve the geographic distribution. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments, but I'm happy to approve.
I think we started asking folks for their like a sort of 30-minute drive time catchment area.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and the retailers that are around where this establishment is now versus where they're going, and I agree, using that as a metric that it improves the density. It does mean that in the new location there will be a couple within a mile of each other. Which we've heard from public health folks is could be an issue, but at the same time, a challenge I think is that how retail locations are, like suitable retail places in general in Vermont tend to be sort of like densely, like we're in downtowns. That's kind of how we're organized. So I did look at that, and it was something I considered, but it also it's just sort of how our commerce is organized.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the first, I could be wrong here, one of the first relocation requests we've gotten where there's actually a number of other retailers and where they hope to go. I know we've entertained a couple that had like one or something, and this one feels a little bit different, but I think on the whole it does relieve or achieve the intended underlying premise of, easing some of the saturation points of the market.
Yeah. And like within 1 mile of another, or, I think the legislature is working on S-278 that would allow towns greater authority over, they want to avoid that kind of clustering issue. So,
Right.
But I think the overall picture that we're concerned about, I think, is achieved through this relocation. So I'm happy to entertain a motion to approve the request.
Give me a second. My laptop. I move that the board find the proposed relocation would, taken in totality, tend to improve the geographic distribution of retail cannabis establishments, and accordingly, that we approve the location amendment requested.
Seconded.
You know what? I did have a question. For some reason, I felt like Springfield was one of the towns that had subsequently opted out after they opted in. That's not the case? I could be totally off base on that.
If they
I
have
guess-
if they have a local commission, right? That local commission has to approve this before it comes
Yeah.
to us.
That's true. Okay. All right. So I withdraw that
I
question.
believe.
Yes. Yeah. That will work it itself out administratively one way or the other. So yeah. But do we have a seconded motion?
We do.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. A lot to get through. I'm sorry we didn't resolve all the outstanding issues, but we do, I think, with a little bit more time and a little bit more conversation, we'll get through the kind of 2 unresolved issues at the next meeting. And please be in touch if any of those issues that we didn't resolve will impact your business, and we can kind of get a broader sense of the direction we should head. So really appreciate it, and I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.